This is a short essay by the novice therapist titled Guilt, Parenthood, and Punishment, or How We Deal with Our Toddlers. Let's dive in. Exhaustion, punishment, and parenthood. The morning began, by contemporary standards, gently. We were woken around 7, an hour that feels almost indulgent when you have a toddler and no hospital shifts looming. It was a golden weekend. My son announced himself by leaping onto my torso and declaring, with the solemn authority of a child who has discovered taxonomy, "I am Thai Air. You are Ryanair." He asked, roughly 30 times, whether I, too, required kerosene, bouncing on my stomach as if it were a municipal trampoline. My wife, recruited into the game, was instructed to play Scar from The Lion King, which gave my son a reason to attack her and then return, triumphantly, to me. Lion became airplane. Airplane became lion. We did not merely endure this, we loved it. At least that morning. Breakfast followed. Pancakes alongside radishes, cucumbers, persimmons, apples, quail eggs, turnip cabbage, pretzels, and truffle butter. A strange menu, perhaps, but a familiar parental ambition, to offer diversity to a child while indulging one's own faintly ridiculous palate. These luxuries tend to expire, however, when the chores begin. Weekend chores, as every parent knows, carry a particular weight. My wife did the laundry. I cleaned the kitchen. Our son played with toy cars in the living room. We checked in on him. All seemed well. 20 minutes later, he called for us. We answered, both of us, but asked for a few more minutes. We declined his request. We had chores. We had, by our accounting, already given him our full attention. Yesterday, too. In response, he found a pen and painted the wall. My wife was annoyed. So was I. This, social media reassures us, is the everyday life of the boy mom. Toddler boys, we are told, hit differently. 5 minutes later, I joined him in the living room. Still irritated by my wife's scolding, he smiled at me with unmistakable intent and urinated on the sofa while lying down. I stayed calm, miraculously, by repeating to myself that anger would only produce chaos. I did not act out, though my fantasies briefly achieved new and unsettling heights. I lifted him from the sofa and carried him to the bathroom, only to discover that he had also defecated. He is, I should add, potty-trained. We were both annoyed. A quarrel followed. I wanted to punish him. My wife kept asking why he had done it. I drew a line. "Listen," I said, "Mommy wanted to invite us for cake this afternoon. That's off the table. No cake." "Why?" "Because of what you just did." My wife is an attentive listener of Becky Kennedy and a resident in child and adolescent psychiatry. I am a physician trained in psychosomatic medicine, a German specialty formerly known as psychotherapeutic medicine, and I write for one of the larger German psychotherapy journals. And yet, in moments like this, we are indistinguishable from any other parents. We try to do right by him with play, with food, with attention. We encourage independent play and do not fear boredom. My wife does not want to punish. She wants me to mentalize his behavior. I do try. Years of therapy have trained me to differentiate anxiety from adaptive emotions, impulse from defense. To me, his behavior felt like deviance, acting out after not receiving attention, expressed through an act he knew I despised, one he had used before. My wife thought he might have been overwhelmed and that we should not induce guilt by punishment. I disagree, carefully. I believe guilt can be good. Not the punitive self-attack, that is not guilt but shame, but healthy guilt, the kind that guides moral decisions and has love at its core. I tried to make this argument in my first Substack entry. Parenthood, like any meaningful relationship, seems to stretch between love and anger. But the feelings we have toward our children differ in kind from those we feel toward spouses or friends. We imagine the impact on their future selves. We shy away from punishment or overindulge in it. We shame or we withdraw. We sense intuitively that injury wounds the child, and as many psychodynamic theorists argue, injury elicits retaliatory impulses. When aggression is directed toward a loved object, guilt follows. The greater the injury, the more overwhelming the guilt. Dostoevsky teaches us that unconscious guilt often leads to cascades of self-punishment. Fully feeling guilt and acting on it can relieve the need for that punishment. We want to be able to feel guilty. It allows us to function in society. We want others to feel guilt when they cause harm. And we want our children to develop healthy guilt so they can play well with peers and belong to communities. We teach them to apologize, to help with chores, to make amends. We hope they learn. But does punishment foster healthy guilt? Polemically, many boomers would say yes. For generations, children, especially boys, were meant to be toughened up. Today, no educated parent would endorse that view. The evidence of harm is overwhelming. Still, the question remains: how does good guilt develop? Many psychodynamic theorists argue that guilt is innate and need not be taught. We might think of three primary sources. 1. An innate seed, present before the age of 3. 2. A nurtured form, fostered through love and care. 3. A social form, learned primarily through interaction amongst children themselves after the age of 3. The innate form, we are good inside. This is an ancient question. One could look at war and cruelty and conclude that humanity is fundamentally evil. But closer observation reveals astonishing cooperation. We share knowledge, organize societies, create kindergartens, schools, and health systems. Much psychological suffering arises not from evil monsters, but from conflicts within, especially the tension between love and hate. We restrain hatred toward loved ones because guilt would follow. Symptoms often arise not from being attacked, but from anxiously hiding one's feeling of guilt about one's own anger. If guilt is innate, it does not need to be invented or amplified by punishment. Nurture, receiving the good. Nurture waters the seed. The caregiver's delighted gaze at a child's first bodily productions, the rough play under a blanket, the arms that hold a boy when his knee hurts. These moments communicate. I am here for you. Love received becomes love internalized. Years later, when that boy becomes a father and misses a school play or fails to comfort his own child, guilt follows. Not because he was taught to feel it, but because he knows what he once received and struggles to pass on. Social interaction. Learning the rules. Michael Tomasello has argued that before age 3, children focus on dyadic relationships, where rudimentary guilt already appears. After 3, attention shifts toward group goals, especially among peers. Children negotiate rules in play. Deviations are sanctioned. Offenders may be excluded. The groundwork is laid early. Parental rules become group rules, and eventually the child's own. It is tempting to declare punishment inherently bad. That is the easy road. Punishment is neither good or bad, thoughtful or sadistic, functional or meaningless. It is multifaceted. It can enforce cooperation or serve aggression. In 2026, I would not want to find myself in Iran during the protests, where speaking in favor of human rights may be treated as a crime against God, and punished by the mullahs with the death penalty. Sanity, in such moments, stands in opposition to power. Yet, if we agree that the gravity of an offense should correspond to the gravity of its consequence, most of us would also agree that certain acts, rape for instance, require punishment, even when remorse or apology is present. We understand, too, that tax evasion corrodes a society, quietly starving its schools and hospitals. A citizen who takes without giving back is eventually excluded, formally or informally, from the moral community. And yet, when the transgression is our own, we are tempted to shrug. It's only a little money. Punishment, then, appears to be an inescapable feature of social life and, regrettably, of parenthood as well. The task is not to exile punishment to the Middle Ages, but to distinguish between punishment that serves a purpose and punishment that is merely the parent's own acting out. As my wife reminded me while I was writing this, Becky Kennedy does not argue that punishment is immoral. She argues that it is ineffective. What she calls for, instead, is cooperation. And cooperation, after all, is what parental punishment is meant, however imperfectly, to cultivate: a sense of shared responsibility and healthy guilt. How we punish, or how we set boundaries. In my clinical work, I hear stories of grotesque punishment: confinement in the basement with a bucket for defecation, biting the child, prolonged withdrawal of love, at times for weeks. Others fantasize about punishment, convinced that I, the therapist, wish to punish them. Anyone reading this essay likely falls outside those extremes. Still, the word punishment carries these associations. What parents often want is not punishment, but containment, to keep children within boundaries that reflect family norms and values. Yet when I said, "No cake because of what you did," I was not setting a boundary. I was punishing. The day passed without incident. He was quieter, sadder. I felt guilty. We tried to talk. He wanted the cake. I reminded him of my decision. I thought I set a boundary. We endured the mood together. My wife reminded me that it was not a boundary, but rather punishment. Because a boundary is something you set, not taking something away from a child. Are boundaries always tethered to punishment once a rule is broken? And are those rules themselves always fair? Or are we, without quite knowing it, punishing the parts of our children we find most intolerable in ourselves? The noisy, exhausting, unruly qualities that are, inconveniently, essential to development. If so, boundary setting risks becoming something more troubling: a covert attempt to mold the child into what we wish them to be. What boundaries do we impose on ourselves, and do we truly live by the norms we claim to uphold? Or is there an unspoken rule at work that a certain degree of mischief is not only tolerated, but secretly enjoyed? In that case, punishment and boundaries become elements of a familiar family drama, a kind of psychic choreography meant to preserve order, not unlike the couples who quarrel over an open toothpaste tube, less for hygiene than for the argument itself, which enlivens the evening in other ways. Some practical thoughts. In my clinical practice, I make a point of avoiding advice. It runs counter to my therapeutic stance. One can imagine, then, how liberating it feels to write on a platform that makes no such demands of restraint. So, with that small indulgence granted, allow me to add my 2 cents, or, as the Germans would say, my mustard. 1. Guilt is innate. We are good at heart, and so are our children. No toddler misbehaves because he or she is bad. It is worth keeping this firmly in mind. 2. Guilt is also a process. We may begin from a place of inner goodness, but as children we actively learn about consequences, boundaries, punishment, and cooperation. This learning typically begins around the age of 3. By 6, the rudiments of a moral framework are often in place, and we can reasonably trust children to enter school without behaving like small anarchists. We cannot expect moral understanding to be fully formed at the outset. It takes time. 3. Whenever possible, try not to punish but to set boundaries. Punishment is directed at the child. Boundaries are directed at the relationship. You did X. I cannot change you or undo what happened. But this is my response. I will not continue playing if you bite me. 4. Punishment is neither purely good nor purely bad. 5. Guilt functions as our moral compass. How do we feel about our own responses to our children? Did we act well or poorly? Though I am trained as a psychodynamic therapist, I firmly believe that children learn primarily through observation. This is how introjections are formed. If our moral compass tells us we acted badly, we should say so and apologize. Children learn that mistakes are human and that relationships can be repaired. 6. Repair, however, carries responsibility. We cannot apologize and then repeat the same behavior. That teaches a child that repair is empty and that words matter more than the relationship itself. 7. Choose guilt over shame, responsibility and openness over punitive self-attack, withdrawal, and fear of being seen. Tell your spouse what you did, and do not evade it. Be the parent you wish you had. 8. Observe the family dynamic carefully. Is there a part of you that enjoys having a mischievous child? Do you behave in ways that might signal permission? Laughing when food is thrown? Winking when a tongue is stuck out? 9. Begin by looking at yourself rather than at your spouse. We all externalize, but start by examining your own behavior. Are you overwhelmed by work, household demands, or exhaustion? Is there something you, rather than your child, might need to change? 10. Finally, consider your child's role within the family. Is she the black sheep or the princess? What special treatment does she receive? Conclusion. This essay neither condemns nor glorifies punishment. The debate is ancient and unresolved. We love our children and want them to function. Culture, as Freud taught us, requires the suppression of some drives. Boundaries enable cooperation. Deviance complicates it. Our aim is not punishment, but the acceptance of limits. Moral development takes time. Nurture is central, not because it eliminates guilt, but because it tempers shame. Children internalize care and boundaries, carry those internal figures into the world, and use it to negotiate morality with others. We will fail often. That is not the problem. We cannot protect our children from pain, sadness, anger, or guilt. We can help them feel less shame and anxiety as they encounter them. Traumatic events are part of life. And all of this concerns only the parent-child dyad or triad. It ignores sibling rivalry, transgenerational patterns, and the complicated inheritance of love and resentment. For more on siblings, I recommend Franny Talks Freud's On Siblings. I enjoyed a conversation between Arnon Grunberg and Adam Phillips, a talk which offered something parenting literature often lacks: nuance.